it's easy to get those first couple cars, and those are these people that have a quick turnaround. Like you could hypothetically have 3 or 4 cars going and have what I would say is like, say you have $100 premium, right? Whatever it is for car payments, and you buy 5 cars, $6,000 a year passive income just on leverage, right? And you put that into a business, a new business, so that that doesn't sit on your personal balance sheet. You just PG the car loans. So that's just hypothetically how that would work out. Those ones are easy for us to pull in and get out, but we don't generally, if someone wants to come up with one, that same person who qualifies for one could get 4 pretty easily.
All right, Justin Pappan is the founder of EV Access, an electric vehicle rental service based in Phoenix, Arizona. Founded 3 years ago, EV Access serves visitors and Uber drivers by providing green-friendly electric vehicles while prioritizing flexible rental options and a higher standard of customer service. Justin, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I don't know if I ever told you this, but do you know that I was a customer of yours at one point?
I found out recently through Martin because you guys talked about it on his podcast, and he like happened to bring it up. But it was like, I told him like, oh, he was ghost shopping, like as a joke, but you probably had no idea that there was even like a correlation.
Well, I think I actually didn't know about you before then. And, I drive a Tesla Model Y now. I've driven a Tesla Model 3. So I've had a Tesla for 8, 9 years. And once you go Tesla, I always say it's really hard to go back to another car because, you get used to using the app to turn the air conditioning on and the, autopilot or full self-driving. So whenever I rent a car, when I go on a trip, usually I'm driving far too, I go on golf trips and I got to drive an hour. So it's like, oh, if I don't have a Tesla, it's brutal. So yeah, I'm a big fan of these Tesla rental services. So thank you.
Yep. No, I heard, I think the biggest thing is you were just missing the charging cable. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. When I test out a lot of services, like I put my customer hat on, like, oh, Justin, you're my best friend. I know you. I don't care about any of that. I'm like, hey, I've got like my kind of like, I want to say like throw a customer under the bus, but like they're kind of selfish. Like they're thinking about themselves. It's like, hey, I'm here to use this car. If it's not exactly to my needs, I'm going to complain or I'm going to sort of, kind of treat it in a way that, like this is what I need. This is what I want. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's we used to provide the charging cables, but then people just kept on taking them. And then Tesla stopped giving them out for free in their deliveries. So it just became like the new supply of Tesla chargers. Like we're going to replace them every single time for $200. So we just do it on request, which is kind of, I would say it is somewhat inconvenient, but it's also just comes to the fact that they're a limited supply at some level.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm excited to dive into a lot of these types of issues and how you run and manage your business. But, we've sort of teased it already, but give me the quick pitch, the quick overview of what you're up to right now with EV Access.
Yep. So in simplest form right now, we are an EV rental car company. We work a lot with like short-term renters, whether it be on Turo or through our own platform. And we work a lot with like very long-term renters that like I would say subscribe to the vehicles with the Uber drivers. We have people that since we started that program in January of 2023, we have people who still haven't given their cars back from their original rental. And those are all set up to be month to month. So that's our main niche right now. And the whole pitch from the very beginning for everyone was to be really focused on the future of building out infrastructure. So when these robotaxi fleets start coming, Elon talked about like he wants to partner up with like fleet management companies, right? And our next big thing is to try to develop our charging infrastructure here in Phoenix and just get better at managing stuff at scale and try to automate as much as possible. So when that switch does happen, that those kind of fleeting services are available and they're looking for partners, we stand out to them and we're a viable partner that they know they can work with.
Very cool. So what does your fleet look like right now? I believe you're in a few cities. What's the number of cars or the types of different cars?
Yep. We're just about 250 cars right now. We're going to be adding about 50 more Teslas. All those are actually going to be used. We were buying new for the longest time during COVID because that was the most efficient way. And it was the price hikes. Buying used was just not as advantageous at the time, right? And now the prices have dropped. They've kind of baseline. You can kind of more accurately predict the depreciation curve, especially in like a 2022 or 2023 Model 3. So we're going to get more of those specifically for the Uber side of that. And that will take us about 300 cars. We're currently right now out of Phoenix and Salt Lake City. That's where our 2 largest hubs are. And we did Salt Lake City to intentionally test like what a middle market would look like and see like if there's not as much competition from Uber, how does other companies that would work with Uber, like what does it look like to do rentals there? As everyone finds out going to the small markets, it's somewhat difficult. It's not as easy as, but it's been a good learning experience for us.
So you like the idea of renting Teslas to Uber drivers in Salt Lake City because there's not as much competition from other fleet owners that are renting to drivers? Was that the hypothesis?
Yeah, like even like the Hertz or like the Avises, there's not nearly the movement to like try to capture all that market share.
Interesting.
Versus like, for example, going to LA, where
Yeah.
a lot of Uber drivers are renting from those like.
Well, it reminds me of a project I did with a fleet owner during COVID, and they were based in New York and they were looking to expand to new markets. And we did a bunch of Facebook ads to test the acquisition costs in a bunch of different markets. And LA actually was the cheapest and sort of the best numbers to acquire drivers, even though there were like 15 or 20 competitors. And it was just, there was so much damn demand, we could
Yep.
still, be one of the 10 or 15. So I don't know if there's any early results from that Salt Lake City pilot you can share, or maybe we can have you on again in the future to talk about it.
Yeah, it's the Salt Lake City is unique because it's the inverse of Phoenix in terms of the
Hmm.
busy markets. So what we saw was that the slow season for Salt Lake City doesn't drop as low as Phoenix's summers, but their peak season isn't nearly as high, right? And
Mm.
that affects the short-term rentals, less of the Uber drivers. And you're right, it's harder to find drivers. And I think that correlates with the idea that not everyone's looking for that service versus in
Hmm.
LA, it's a very common, knowledge stake to say, hey, if I need to drive you
Yeah.
to have a car, go rent a Tesla, right? And
Yeah.
like we have seen that feedback from Uber and other companies that want to like have us fleet cars there in LA for Uber. Like it seems to be the spot everyone wants to be, that in
Hmm.
Dallas. So, and I think
Interesting.
that a lot just has to deal with like customer like decision making. It's easier when they see other people doing it all the time versus being like it's not as common, to
Yeah.
rent it to drive Uber in Salt Lake City.
What are the synergies between renting cars more on a short-term basis to, customers, consumers like myself that are traveling versus renting, weekly or monthly to Uber drivers?
Yeah. So
Because,
the
well, I guess my question is like, are there synergies or is it a different business or, how do you kind of think about the two?
Yeah, it feels like I would say it's very, very similar in terms of the obviously you're just renting a car to somebody, right?
Yeah.
But the first week of a long-term renter, if they haven't driven a Tesla, it's very similar to a short-term rental. A lot of it's just education based.
Mm.
A lot of it for a short-term renter is just showing them how to find superchargers and like,
Hmm.
they have a hotel, letting you know you can charge it for free at your hotel if you're staying at the Ritz-Carlton, whatever it is, right? And then also same thing though with the Uber drivers, the intro education you give them, I think, is the strongest correlation to them being with you for more than 6 months to a year. And
Mm.
one of the things we teach them is when to charge the car. Don't charge at 12 o'clock in the afternoon during
Yeah.
peak hours. Also, here is PlugShare. This is an app that tells you where all the free chargers might be, if they're grant funded, if you have to pay for them, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
And Phoenix has a lot of free level 2 chargers all across the
Very
valley.
cool.
So we'll be like, hey, you live here. I think one of your best game plans is to drive from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. middle of the day when it's not busy, plug your car into the free charger. It will charge up. Come back,
Nice.
6 hours later, car's gonna be done charging. It's now busy hours to drive again, drive again. At the end of the night, plug it in. And those people that we've helped avoid the supercharging network as a whole as a driver are the ones that we, like I said, we have people who have been with us for
Mm.
2 years since we started. And a lot of that correlates with just being hands on and being helpful at the beginning versus them coming back after the first month and realizing they paid $600 in supercharging because they charged at 12 o'clock every day to 100%,
Yeah, you're sort of combining driving strategy, which, Rideshare guy, my business has talked about. It's really the crux of my business for the past 10
Yep.
years with kind of what I call charging strategy. I haven't heard it laid out in that much detail, but I guess it makes a lot of sense because supercharging has gotten quite expensive these days, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. At the beginning, it was, I want to say we were looking at the 18 to 24 cents a kilowatt with the chargers near us in Phoenix. And
Mhm.
now it's up to like, I want to say it's up to 60 cents in some peak locations
Wow.
off the interstate, which is absurd in my opinion. That's
So
getting
what does it
expensive.
cost if you've got a long range Tesla? I think that's a sort of a rated 300-mile range. It costs you what to fill that
Yeah.
up?
A 55 kilowatt battery now, that would be
Mm.
like $30 to fill up,
Yeah.
that. And then we do a lot of these standard ranges and
Mm.
like all the recent purchase or the ones in the last year or so. And that has more to do with the battery that's installed in those cars, less of the actual like optimizing for the range of the driver. Because we found that the long range is
Got it.
deteriorating really fast because they were all charging them to 90 or 100% over and over again
Yeah.
versus the LFP batteries. You can have the person charge to 100% every time and it's not going to have nearly as big of an
Hmm.
impact.
Interesting. Is your whole fleet Teslas?
Almost. I think we have 150 of the 250 cars are EVs or are
Cool.
Teslas rather. We have a bunch of Chevy Bolts, Mach-E's. We have a couple of Rivians that aren't used for rideshare, obviously,
Mhm.
Lucids that aren't used for rideshare, and a couple hybrids.
Got
So
it.
It's the majority.
Any downsides to Teslas as sort of the primary vehicle in your fleet? I know that during COVID, I think a lot of fleet owners like Hertz had issues because I think it was the depreciation on the, Elon started lowering the price of all these new Teslas. So I assume that hurts the used
Yep.
Tesla. And now you guys are getting used, I'm guessing, for that reason.
Yeah, 70 of our new ones. So the last big purchase of new ones was December of last year. Let's give or take 70 vehicles. That was mostly made because Tesla was offering huge discounts before the Highland
Hmm.
came out. So we were getting about $3,000 off per car. So we really weren't that bad in depreciation in those. But the cars we got in 2022 and the beginning of 2023, not as heavy on our fleet side, unfortunately. Those ones have seen massive depreciation. Like
Hmm.
we're on the balance sheet, it doesn't look good, right? So
Yeah.
we really balanced out by as the price started lowering, we bought a couple more cars. When we saw that bigger discount from Tesla at the end of last year, we knew the Highland was coming. We knew that would probably impact the price of the vehicle. But walking out the door, in the low 30s, felt
What's
quite
the
comfortable.
Highland you're referring to?
The Highland Model 3, so like the
Got it.
refreshed Model 3.
Oh, got it. Is that what
Yeah,
it's called? The Highland? Oh, I haven't even
yeah,
heard that
yeah.
term yet.
Like that was, I think it was called Project Highland, is what they called it
Okay. Yeah, I
internally.
see it all over the internet. I guess I'm not as big of a Tesla fan as I thought, but
Oh, you're good. So yeah, that in that regards, we're good. And most of the cars this year we've purchased have all been used Model 3s. A lot of them, ironically, from Hertz
hmm,
and auction houses. It just that is a bigger predictor for depreciation when the cars have miles on it and not buying it from obviously Tesla themselves and having no markups. So we feel really comfortable with those cars.
yeah. What is when you're buying and selling and maintaining and managing and operating a fleet? We won't get into all the things you have to do, but what's the hardest part, do you think, about your business on sort of the vehicle side?
Yeah. So Teslas are unique where everything seems to be more expensive than it should be, whether it's the
Hmm.
glass or just the claims process in general can be more difficult. When we first got started, it was very, very difficult for us to even find body shops that could take our volume when we started growing
Hmm.
enough because most people just didn't feel comfortable working at Teslas. Tesla even didn't have their own body shops in town. Like they had
Yeah.
these like subcontracted ones. They now have one in town that we use, but it's just not I'd say it's not the most optimized one. It's really good.
Hmm.
They do a good job, but you have to pay in cash and you have to deal with the insurance stuff versus going to a regular body shop. They'll handle all the insurance processes. So that's been the most difficult part. If you get a Chevy Bolt, has something wrong with it, you can get in and out 20 days, right? It's a body shop.
Yeah.
It's right in their bread and butter. So as we've seen claims go 90 days when they know
Wow.
the issue is they're just ordering parts, right? And like that makes a big difference when you're having, probably in the hundreds or 200s claims per year, whether it's become
Yeah.
just full glass claims or as big as, a total out.
And I mean, that downtime is a big issue for you guys because it's lost revenue or
Yep. Yeah. It's pretty simple in that regard. Just lost revenue. You obviously have your insurance deductibles, you have cover. So like anytime the car is in an accident, you feel it in the pocketbook. One way we've tried to avoid the accidents is just controlling the speed of the vehicles. You probably noticed in your rental car, it was capped at 90 miles per hour.
yeah, which is
Uh,
fast.
yeah, you would think that would be the
But
response.
people probably go even faster, huh?
Some people get a little upset when they see our cars capped at 90. That's a very small pocket of the population. They'll always give bad reviews. It's like an entitlement thing. It's like they want to be able to drive as fast as they want. And the issue
Yeah.
is that you'll see people go 120, 125. You'll see
Hmm.
some crazy speeds. It's like, well, if this person is in an accident at that point, that's a
I
big
mean,
loss.
it's sometimes I think that, it's sort of when you have a product, you're kind of building for the right customer. Like someone who's going to complain about more than 90 is someone you probably don't want to rent to in the first place. So it's like a pretty big
100%.
red flag.
I say that all the time. Especially if it's the first day and someone's like, hey, the car's locked at 90. I will offer a full refund. Like, hey, we can
Mm,
help you find a different fleet
yeah,
or a different car in the
that's smart.
marketplace. Because it's not necessarily and they almost never take that, by the way, because they like really it's not that big of a deal. They just want to say something. They want to be
Mm,
heard at some level. And it's like, hey, we can help you out with that. Like I'm indifferent, honestly. Like
yeah,
I'm not here to like have you convince me that you can go 120, right?
got it. Well, so what's the good thing about Teslas then? Because you've got a whole fleet of them, so I imagine there's definitely the positives outweigh the negatives, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So the biggest thing for us is obviously maintenance, tracking the maintenance issues. I've seen a lot of gas car fleets, even if it's the Priuses in town. I've talked to the rental car owners, and they have their own downtime metric also, not just
Hmm.
claims, but it's also just maintenance issues, whether it's
Hmm.
their engines are going
Oh,
out,
interesting.
uh, whatever all the issues gas cars can have, right?
Yeah.
And the positives for us, and yeah, I don't think you fully experienced this. You might have experienced like the beta version. We use standard fleet for our key access, right?
Yeah.
And that has been a big big thing for us to basically just control everything virtually and not give you physical keys. Because did you have a physical key when you rented with us? Or was
I
it virtual?
can't remember if I rented one from you guys or another Tesla fleet owner when I did another golf trip. Basically, only rent Teslas on my golf trips,
Yep.
apparently. And yeah, I think they sent me a link and then I could click it. And I think I actually did a LinkedIn post about it and I could have access to the car. It was really cool. I flew JSX in, I think, to one of the Vegas airports and I got the key. The car was waiting and I got right in. It was like
Was it
really
called
amazing experience.
RSG? Was the key link you got sent? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So that's standard fleet. Yeah. So that's been those like technology sides and actually automation build
Mm.
outs. That makes it a lot easier for us to be able to just scale the fleet and not have to
Yeah.
what you can control. If someone you can connect them so they pay for the supercharging, you can charge them
Mm.
for extensions. Hypothetically, you can lock the car up if they're doing something that is deemed risky. You
Yeah.
can hypothetically throttle the extension price of the trip based on the risky behaviors they're
Hmm.
driving. So like what you see on Turo, for example, is that if someone is deemed as a risky person, their
Hmm.
trip fees might go from $14 a day. So they'll message us and say, why is it $300 to extend for one day? Because Turo just
Because
maxes
I've
out
seen
the
them
fee.
driving like crazy, huh?
Yeah, they have their Teslas connected to the system, right? And then I don't know how they
Hmm.
determine it, but somehow they're determining this person just became risky, and that person will stop extending it. And we're not making any more, by the way, when they determine
Yeah.
it's risky. It's just their trip fees, right? So it's the same aspect. It's like, how can we determine if someone's risky? How can we kind of use price as a leverage point to hedge that
Yeah.
risk or opt them to not have to extend, right? And that's not really possible as much with gas cars, in my opinion.
Well, I
And that
think you highlighted a good difference because I've noticed with my Tesla, like I never have to take it in for any real maintenance. If anything, I like don't rotate the tires and then end up, kind of screwing myself over because it never needs anything and it's kind of a hassle just to rotate tires. But, that is something that is unique to Tesla and EVs. But, accidents are kind of, whether you're electric or an ICE car, you're kind of going to have those issues, I imagine, in like maybe it's a little more, a little less, but same ballpark. So I feel like that's a good area. It's a good point. You can kind of like distinguish yourself from another fleet owner who's got only ICE vehicles. Like you guys are both going to get into the same number of accidents ish, but that's like one thing. It just doesn't need nearly as much maintenance. So less downtime, more people in the cars, more higher utilization, et cetera. Right.
100%. And I think I think partnerships are important in any business, but
Hmm.
having like a viable partner that you're comfortable working with, that
Yeah.
that your cars might even be prioritized over their average customer because you have enough volume where they should be prioritizing that, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have like 9 cars at one body shop right now, right?
Yeah.
And their lot probably fits 30 cars. So that means we're probably a third of all their cars in inventory. And so they've been great for us.
So, how do you finance all of these vehicles? Because obviously, Teslas and cars in general are pretty expensive, 40, 50, 60,000 bucks. So, how do you add 50 cars to the fleet, for example?
Yep. So we do a little bit unique strategy. We obviously have our in-house vehicles. We call them corporate vehicles, and we have something
Hmm.
called vehicle partners. So these are people, whether it's, and I stay out of the extra stuff. When I say the extra stuff, I mean like the tax planning and the tax strategies, all
Hmm.
that extra stuff. But it's people who want to come in and buy, say, one guy did 40 Tesla Model 3s, right?
Oh, cool.
What we do is we add a premium on top of that payment.
Hmm.
So let's just say the arbitrary payment he buys 40 cars, he spends 1 point whatever $1 million, right? You divide that up, you make a arbitrary loan that he would have on his balance sheet because he's usually taking leverage against their assets on hand, less of like a
Got
formal loan. And say the car's going to be $600 a month, right?
it.
We'll
Hmm.
come back and say, hey, we'll give you a premium of $675 a month, accounting for your down payment, which is an arbitrary number that they'll use when they leverage their money out. It will
Hmm.
extinguish 30% cash on cash returns over the next 4 years or 20%. And that number is the important number. Is like how much cash they're actually using and drawing out to make this process happen and what are their returns. And that's all just based on the premium on top of their payments. So if they buy
Hmm.
a car through a normal loan originator and their payment is $550, it's really
Yeah.
easy to say exactly what the return has to be, right? When
Got
they're
it.
doing their own financing and custom financial strategies, it gets a little bit more complicated. You have to make sure the contracts are set up right. But that's
Yeah.
that's the idea, is that someone wants to come here and they can buy a car, they can take the tax credit, and they're
Hmm.
basically just selling financing to us, and then we can just take over the car payments.
Got it. What kind of return would a vehicle partner be looking for if they're putting it onto your platform, for example?
Yeah, so a lot of them want to be at that 20%. That's what it really comes
20%?
down to. 20% cash on cash returns. Not so their goal is to put as little down as possible because then it becomes a calculation of cash used versus tax
Hmm.
savings gained, with the
Yeah.
electric vehicle tax credits. Because when it's the 45W side of it. Like I said, I'm not a tax expert. I don't.
Yeah, definitely we won't take it as tax advice, but I
Yeah,
do think it's interesting, like broadly, to explore. I'm sure if people want to look into it, they can. But I guess this is kind of like I actually haven't heard of this in a while, but it's sort of the idea. Like you're a fleet owner, you're renting these vehicles, and someone else who just kind of wants to help you finance the assets is sort of stepping in for that role, basically.
yeah, and it's actually used in another industry pretty commonly. These all these like jet charter companies that come
Hmm.
out nowadays. I won't name any names, but some of their strategies are we'll have another person buy this private jet for us, and they'll have an arbitrary payment or a profit share of some sort, depending on what's a
Hmm.
larger, better beneficial for us. It's the like planes don't get in accidents really.
Hmm.
You don't have these arbitrary random
Yeah.
downtimes that you predict, all this stuff. So we had it for a while where it was a profit share, and we switched just a guaranteed car payment on top of it
Hmm.
just to minimize the risk for the other person and probably downsize their max gain, right? But
Hmm.
they really want to know in their high net worth individuals, what's my exact return? And you can
Yeah.
predict that by giving them a guaranteed car payment back. And for us, that's cheaper than going to a commercial bank and getting
Hmm.
a loan at 12 or 13% because their
Yeah.
loans they're getting are at nearly perfect rates. They have great relationships with their banks. They're probably
Hmm.
borrowing in that 5 to 7% range. So if we had a
Mm.
$75 premium per month, it's not really impacting,
Got it. Yeah, I
that.
guess that's the arbitrage there. Anyone who can get, especially if you're in the higher net worth category, they always tend to give them really good deals on loans because they want their business for all of their other assets. So if you can get that loan in the like 5 to 10%, 5 to 7%, like you saying, and then put it on your platform. Yeah, because I've had people reach out to me that have asked about, kind of I guess it's more typically it's starting a fleet, but I think this is kind of like a better option to dip your toes into things, maybe.
Yeah, and it works even more better, in my opinion. Obviously, do your own research on this, but it's like getting a 0% interest loan from Tesla, right? And you do
Hmm.
that, you pass the car payment along, because then if we're giving you your payments even lower, that
Yeah.
number, that arbitrary premium, it does have wiggle room, right? Especially when someone has a lot more cars or vice versa. But if someone has a really good payment, it's easier for us
Well,
to give them a
I don't
$100.
know. That's a good example. Isn't Tesla offering a 3% loan right now on?
It depends. I think they have 0% right now if you do
Hmm.
FSD, which I would not tell anyone if they're doing this to add
No.
FSD because it's a wasted prop value.
Yeah, if you're going to add $8,000 for.
Yeah, I think he said $6,000 in interest between that. But yeah, I think it's in that 2.99%, somewhere in there
Hmm.
for 16
Well,
months.
let's use me as an example then. Let's say I wanted to go finance a Model 3 for 3%, and I would have my monthly payment. I guess it's like three, four, $500 a month, maybe $400, $500 a month. Would I be able to put my car on your platform, or do you guys want, someone with more cars, or how would it work?
Yeah, so we have even like relatively recently, we've taken people who have one or two cars. Is this like I'd say 3 to 5 is the sweet spot, and it sounds weird, but it's easy to get 1 to 5 cars when you're
Mm-hmm.
first getting loans like this, and you put them in your business name. By the way, you never buy it personally. It's easy to get those first couple cars, and those are
Mm-hmm.
these people have a quick turnaround. Like you could hypothetically have 3 or 4 cars
Mm-hmm.
going, and have what I would say is like say you have $100 premium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is for car payments, and you buy 5 cars. Now you have a $500, you have $6,000 a year passive income just on
Yeah.
leverage, right? And you put that into a business, a new business, so that
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't sit on your personal balance sheet. You just PG the car loans. So that's just hypothetically how that would work out. Those ones are easy for us to pull in and get out, but we don't generally. If someone wants to come up with one, that same person who qualifies for one could get four pretty easily,
Gotcha.
right? And then especially if it's a 0% interest, like your car payment is lower than everyone else's. Like the newest cars
Mm-hmm.
recently have always been the best ones, and it's easier for us to say, hey,
Yeah.
we give $75. We're open to doing 85 or 95 if you do 4 cars instead of
Yeah. Are you
right.
looking to add vehicle partners like this right now?
So yes, at the start of next year, and there's a reason for it. At the end of the year, the bigger tax plays that we get, like people get referred to us and these like tax attorneys and all that stuff, they all come in all at once, which is why we
Mm-hmm.
had 70 cars in December. It just becomes one of those things. They have all these options for tax plays, whether it's buying
Mm-hmm.
commercial real estate, they have a bajillion options they can operate on, right? But when it becomes December 12th, December 14th, there's only so many things you can do really quickly, right? And one of those just happens to be buying electric vehicles. So we're basically saving our capacity to make sure that we can be all set as the year comes to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's like
like,
Christmas time for you guys, huh?
yeah, yeah. And make a slight amount on the acquisition. Like there's like a little, I don't call it consulting fee, we call it startup fee.
Yeah.
And that just offers all the price of getting it all set up. But yeah,
That's
so
cool.
that is the busiest time of the year for us. So like last year we were taking, there's a video out there with Jeeps, if you know
Mm-hmm.
Jeeps. I think we had like 70 cars come in between the 20, like all those came in on like the 28th to the
Huh.
31st. Like 30 of them came in on the very last day of the year, which is like New Year's Eve, and Tesla's opening. And they said the Mesa location said we broke their record because they usually operate on like 18-ish
Yeah.
deliveries a day. I think they had to send like 35 to us, and they had drivers just driving them back and forth all day long.
Wow.
So they broke their record for most deliveries for that location in one day.
That's pretty cool.
So
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting option. And then I guess one step up from that is sort of more the business that you're in, where you're actually, acquiring the cars and then renting them, putting them on the marketplaces or renting directly, sometimes to Uber drivers, sometimes on Turo or to
yeah.
customers, this sort of car rental business that you're basically in. I guess, do a lot of people ask you, hey, what is this business like? Should I get started? Should I do it? What do you think?
Yes. So I get like a hard time from a lot of like, especially guys in the office or like friends that kind of like know what I'm doing. Cause I get calls. I wouldn't say maybe it is weekly, but or multiple times a week. People all the time will call me, like, especially in the Turo, like, hey, I had this claim. I had this situation. What should I
Mhm.
do here? And I am not at all a guru person. Like, in fact, I kind of like despise the idea of like being like an online guru at some level. But I think we're going to do like a little school, like the Alex Hormozzi thing. Cause I've just talked to these people. It's like, I know people who are making like 60,000 a month doing these
Yeah.
little like course things, and I don't say little, like they're formal processes. And some people really know what they're talking about, but a lot of them really don't. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to say I know more than the average person or whatever, but like, especially on the EV side, and none of them do EVs for the most part. They're all like
Mhm.
gas or exotics or whatever it might be. So we've thought about having some organized way. Well, like, I'll do this, but I'm not, I just want to stay away from the like,
That's funny. Yeah.
I
I
know it's $1,200, but for today only it's $600. Like,
yeah.
I'm just gonna like put stuff there, and if people opt to use it, we'll have a set price. I'm not gonna like put too much effort in trying to be that
Yeah.
guy, I guess. And to be honest, it's really hard
Fleet
for me
owner
to.
guy, car rental
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, it's actually like really hard for me to even do as someone who like recording it. And I'm like, I'm actually just we were doing scripts at first, and I just told them like we're just gonna like get rid of all these because I'm
Yeah.
just gonna talk, and if it doesn't sound perfect, that's fine. But I'm not gonna try to have like these zingers and these one-liners just tucked in there. It's just
Hmm.
gonna be what it is, and if it's not perfect, like that's okay. But I'm not gonna spend an absorbent
Yeah.
amount of time scripting this whole process.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I felt pretty similarly, when I started my rideshare guy business 10 years ago. I think the big difference, though, is that, when you have people who are actually out there doing it, actually doing the job, and then they create a course and then they teach you how to do it, right? That's a big difference than someone who's kind of never done it or teaches you how to make money, online, making money online, the sort of very circular logic. So, and I also have a online marketing sort of idol that I've always followed for the past 15, 20 years and starting all my businesses. His name is Pat Flynn, shout out Smart Passive Income. And he had a really good line once that like, hey, if someone's going to learn, if someone's going to buy a course, like they're going to buy that with or without you. Like you'd rather them buy it from you than someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. So like, I actually think sometimes if you really know what you're doing and what you're talking about, you're kind of doing the community a bit of a disservice because there's going to be a bunch of people like once your course is out there, if people don't buy it, that's fine, whatever. Like we don't make that much money off of our course and our book and our audio book and all that and our training, but like it's out there. If someone wants a good course, like similar to you, I spent a lot of time and energy and effort. So I know that, they could take advantage of that if they want, but I'm not like bashing it over people's heads. So rant over.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just coming. Yeah, it's just like it's a perspective thing,
Yeah.
like I said, I really have nothing against. It's just some of them feel slimy. I
Yeah,
think the
for
biggest thing
sure.
is doing it as if I'm providing value, then it's a transaction. I should view it as a consulting type thing, and
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that there's no one signing up that's like truly wasting their time. And like, if
Mhm.
they choose not to watch it, that's one thing, right? But if someone like is trying to expand their knowledge base, like I would feel really weird saying, "Well, I can come to your office for
Yeah.
$2,500 a day." Like that's where I want to try to avoid those like weird. It's like if it's a natural thing, if he does better, like I will probably learn something new again by
Yeah.
redoing those first steps. I'll be like, "Oh, we used to do it this way," and like maybe
Mhm.
that was a turning point actually. And I
Mhm.
started helping somebody like just for free for like a couple months, and I realized how many things that we changed, but actually might work better on the old way of like how we
Mhm.
used to do it. And I was like, well, this is actually kind of a cool thing. Like as I'm working through this, I'm like finding out that like
Yeah.
maybe some of the changes weren't actually better optimized. And it's just been optimized a couple of different times where we should have just make it simpler. Right.
Yeah. Well, let's say I'm someone who's thinking about starting a fleet. I come to you and I think my first question personally might be like, what is the market here? Like, what is the potential, market size, competitors? Like, how do you think more broadly about the industry? And then maybe we can narrow down from there.
Yep. I think with EVs, I think you're fortunately not stuck to large markets. And I think
Hmm.
there's a couple reasons for that. I think like even if you're in Des Moines, Iowa, for example, like a small town or a medium-sized major city, I guess it's the capital of Iowa, you
Hmm.
still have the ability to have 20, 30 cars, 40 cars, and you're really not going to make a dent on their inventory, right? There's
Hmm.
thousands of rental cars in a city like that. Even if you go to Phoenix, there's whatever 28,000 or 30,000. There's an absorbent amount of rental cars across the valley. So for us to come in and say we have 280 cars, let's say, like we're 1% of the market share, we
Hmm.
don't impact it. Like there's not, we're not like influencing the capacity of it,
Yeah.
right? And if we're operating the top 5% of all the rentals, like we're not gonna have zero issues, right? So that the argument comes in is like if you are gonna add 25 cars, say in Boise, Idaho,
Hmm.
it's more than feasible, right? That's not an issue. It's just you have to be operating in the top 10%. And like it's
Yeah.
like how to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to be off of Turo as soon as possible. Maybe use Turo as a guiding line. I think that's a great place to start. And then figure out a way to operate in your own capacity because you're
Hmm.
limited by your network, right? So if I don't have demand engine off of Turo, then you are just what Turo, you are an operator for them at some level, right?
Yeah.
But if you start bringing your own demand engine and start building a business, like that's when you're building your business, right? It's not on
Hmm.
the world. And I think that is the hardest part, and that people
Hmm.
underestimate, like how demand engines fluctuate. Like last year in June or July, I think we did 80 or 70K on Uber drivers. And
Hmm.
this last June, we did like 50. Like we actually went down. But it was like, I remember thinking how odd it was. We did so good last year in
Hmm.
June. And one of the things we did, which we didn't do this year, when it got slow, I just started taking Ubers all day long. Like it
Yeah.
sounds crazy. I would literally get Ubers and request Tesla EVs because they had it like they came out with the Tesla, whatever Uber
Yeah.
option in Phoenix. And I constantly ride around, find the Hertz drivers and say, hey, I'll give you a free week. And they would
Yeah.
just switch over. And the free week would expire and they start paying the 350 to 450 a week. And we'd have them on. And like
Yeah.
there's a natural churn rate because any person who's going to leave for a free week will obviously leave for another offer
Leave
at some
you.
point. Yeah, exactly. But we had like our summer months last year were incredible. And it was
Hmm.
all because of the simple like guerrilla tactic of just jumping in
Yeah.
Ubers for literally hours.
Hmm.
And that's cheaper than running Google ads though. That
Yeah.
was my comment.
Well,
And I,
especially with, a product that has a higher, weekly revenue or order value, and kind of recurring and longer,
yeah,
lifetime CAC and all that, right? So it's sort of, you can take a $10, $20 Uber and, probably that one-on-one conversation is a lot more effective than someone seeing an ad like, EV access, like, what the hell is that? What is this company? If they meet you in person, it's a lot more effective, right?
and
Obviously
they're either
not as scalable, but
and they're either picking us up at our office or like for example, I was doing to like go to lunch. So I would go to Chipotle, which is literally a minute away
yeah,
from our office, and I would just blindly get an Uber to go to Chipotle and request a Tesla.
yeah.
And then they sometimes they come into our office. So like small things like that, it reminds
Yeah.
like we just need to
I,
plan and organize
I
that.
do like that. That's kind of a good reminder. I mean, I've interviewed people in the past, especially I remember I had a guy, Hamed Yazdi, on my podcast back in the day when Uber and Lyft were doing these $1,000 referrals. And he would fly into different cities every weekend and just call Lyft rides all weekend with his business partner. And I mean, they were clearing hundreds of thousands. They were working their butts off. Like, they had full-time jobs and they were really working. But that kind of like one-on-one, I think with the right product and the right sort of value, obviously you can't do it for like a $5 app download, but, with the right product, you can definitely kind of, you call it guerrilla, but I just call it like in person. I don't even think it's like guerrilla. It's just like in
Yeah.
person marketing that people have gotten so used to, Facebook ads, Google ads, send an email out. I literally just recommended this to a fleet owner who was launching EVs, and I could kind of tell they're like, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that. I was like, okay, well, it would work. And now you're kind of
Yeah.
confirming it for me. So I had a good idea in theory, at least.
Yeah, and okay, we even kind of like Tesla when this is how it started actually was that we would have our cars in the shop at Tesla and they give you the $100 Uber credits
Hmm.
and we just max them out. Like
Yeah.
that's how that, and then initially like so that was like 100% return on
Oh,
investment.
nice.
We weren't even paying for the Ubers, and then after like the car would be in the shop, we just kept on doing it sporadically, right?
I
Um,
like that.
Uber or Tesla got rid of the $100 Uber vouchers
Yeah,
probably
I
because
think I didn't get one my last time in. So interesting. So, you talked a little bit about getting off of marketplaces. I mean, tell me, what does your business look like today? You've got the Uber drivers. I'm guessing you kind of market and rent to them directly. And then your car sharing piece, your sort of more traditional, or sorry, car rental business is more some Turo, and some direct.
Yep. So I'm going to do some quick math really fast because I know the
Sure.
numbers. We're on pace this year to do about 1.7 million on Turo alone.
Cool.
Um, Off of Turo, I was just looking at the numbers. I could do, so we're probably gonna be right under a million on that, and we'll be about a $500,000 in management fees. So we're gonna hit about two, three million and some change. It looks like for like revenue. The goal obviously is like Uber off of Turo represents about 30 to 40% of our revenue, right?
Mhm.
We need to hopefully by May of next year that will represent off Turo represent about 85 to 90%. So the goal will be like, hey, we will go on Turo, right? But this will be
Mhm.
our price mark. It will be whatever $79 a day. We won't ever go down to that 40 or $50 of their fees are charging. So we now add to that, and then we'll lower our deductible. So our risk is
Mhm.
less on Turo because we can't really control every part of the marketplace, right? If there's a claim that happens or somebody smokes in the car, if there's a repo, we're asking for approvals. They're not paying
Mhm.
stuff for us getting cars out of tow yards. They're not reimbursing for like they're disapproving smoking fees where it's like we're never going to come
Mhm.
to you and say this person smoked in a car and they didn't smoke, right? Like why
Yeah.
do I need your permission when you have a deposit for this person to show you past ash in the car and us telling you, right? And it would be a different issue if you ever caught any like us. Like we've never had an issue with someone be like, oh, we got blatantly caught not by the rules, right? But we're only
Yeah.
submitting if it's an actual smoke claim. And in fact, it's never even me. It's our cleaners. So you're talking like
Mhm.
17-year-old, 19-year-old kids who are just cleaning cars. Like, damn, this car sucks. It's got smoked in. And they have to spend an hour cleaning the car, right? So they're like trying to get the best photos possible because they want to charge the person. They're like, screw
Yeah,
this.
you know what's interesting? I think traditionally a lot of operators kind of tend to want to be off of marketplaces, whether it's a rideshare driver or a restaurant. They kind of want to be off of marketplaces. I think the reason I always hear is more because the fees are high, right? The
Mhm.
fees to okay, if I'm a restaurant and I'm on a delivery platform, obviously there's kind of a marketing fee, there's an actual delivery fee, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is like when you open the DoorDash or Uber Eats app or you put a restaurant on, like these companies are huge brands. They have like they're marketing machines, right? So they will send you customers. I think what you're telling me though is actually a little bit different. It's that like maybe you have less control over. I don't know if maybe the fees are also high,
Yeah,
but like
yeah. I mean, the
everything you've
fees
said so far is like less control. Maybe the platform Turo isn't as owner. Maybe they're more customer friendly than owner friendly. In your
oh,
case.
yeah, 100%. I mean, you could probably talk to the Turo Powerhouse event was here recently, and I'm not going to throw any Turo employees under the bus, but they came out and visited our office. We've had
Hmm.
like one-on-one sessions with them. I've talked to a couple of them sporadically, especially recently. They know they're making mistakes, and the
Hmm.
issue is that their lower employees can't fix it. Like they
Hmm.
recognize like they have all the new powerhouse requirements where I don't know a single person that's like reasonably like above 20 cars that's even going to
Yeah.
qualify for the requirements, right? Like it's just not feasible. And these people are what they view as their business is being like destroyed, right? Because they have less opportunity if they're not a powerhouse, they don't have the right coverages, they
Hmm.
don't have the same tire benefits, windshield coverage. And when people ask me about it, it's like, listen, we the issue is that you put yourself in a position to allow them to change their rules and it
Yeah.
impact you as your business. It's not your business. You're just an operating arm for them.
Hmm.
And the only way to get away from that and like having it, you get kicked off Turo also, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetically, big people that have gotten kicked off Turo, most of the time they're doing something a little shady, but sometimes it's not that big.
Yeah.
Like this Andres got involved in this too, who's the CEO of Turo. We had cover photos on our cars. So like at the very bottom right corner, there used to be, which this is crazy. You couldn't search your car by VIN, and you actually
Hmm.
still to this day cannot search your vehicle list by VIN.
Yeah.
So if your unique identifier internally, which a lot of companies are, is the last six or the last four of VIN, you
Hmm.
can't find it by license
Hmm.
plate. So we actually put a really small graphic that was the last four of the VIN. So when we see the car, whether it's on your phone or on the computer, we don't have to go click into the car.
Click
Not
into it
click
and
the
see.
rideshare agreement. Like, you don't even see it on the right, like on the main page. You have to go into the documents to find out which car it was. So long
Yeah.
story short, we put the last four of the VIN there, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I get emails, and it says cars delisted, cars delisted, cars delisted. Your account is
Hmm.
on hold, and we're getting kicked off Turos. What's happening right there? It's because some person had, which they came back and they apologized and all that stuff, had the ability without even having to verify with the manager to be able to delist all of our cars and
Wow.
start canceling our account because we broke their terms of service by having a corner photo cover.
Hmm.
Ironically enough, we had permission from like an executive to do that, like on their executive
Yeah.
support team, and it was documented. They just don't communicate. So long story short, in one night, that's when this was our big push to go off Turo, was that we had potentially the whole business, the whole revenue source was about to go away the next day, if all because we put four digits on the bottom right corner of the photo.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
I
So,
mean,
and
yeah, I think that principle though, like, is really important across all these marketplaces. Like, this is sort of why we tell, hey, Uber drivers, like, sign up for both Uber and Lyft in case something happens. I just had a friend, he used his Airbnb, customer account to book a rental, and they accused him of having, like leaving some drugs or something behind, and it was from a different party. And then his host account also, which he was like a power host, got suspended because of his customer account. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty scary. That,
yeah,
it's sort of like there's definitely a lot of good with these platforms, but there's also a lot of bad. Like, you're kind of just a number on a spreadsheet, even if, maybe you're a top host or a power host or you think you're important, but you're not always, as important as you think.
yeah. And the best example, the largest person on Turo, I'm not going to his name, he has 2,000 cars. Great guy. We
Mm-hmm.
were just here at office. He's not a power host on their metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is you don't get the same customer support. You have to call overseas support instead of local support. It means when you have a claim, you have to talk to different claims teams. Like everything's just harder
Yeah.
because you don't have priority help. And it actually makes a big difference on business. We'd call in for swaps on Turo. A swap is when you're changing vehicles. And it might take us 5-10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
On power host support. But if you happen to get the overseas team, it can take a half hour to an hour. And if you have 2,000 cars, how many swaps you need a day? It's probably a lot, right? And those small things can add up. So Turo opted to, instead of actually figure out a way to help their largest person, they just said, oh, you didn't make this metric. And because
Yeah.
of that, we're actually just going to step out of the way and just let you fail. Because
Mm.
that's what they're doing, right? So then instead of your blind as fell, and instead of having a problem solving and a solution finding mindset, they just say,
Yeah.
oh, well, we set these benchmarks, you didn't make it, whatever it is, we're no longer going to be a support system for you. And that's what they
Yeah.
basically effectively communicate to a lot of people. And that I think is an issue in its own because now you're not prioritizing the host at that point. If you
Yeah.
can't figure out where to help someone with 2,000 cars, then you're not built for those people, and those people are going to end up leaving you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's scary stuff. But before I let you go here, I got a few more rapid fire topics that I want to hit on. What are some of your favorite tools for fleet owners out there?
So obviously, we have Blue Dot for our non-Tesla charging. They're really good. When I
Hmm.
talk about the Tesla aspects, Blue Dot's really good for emerging charging networks. If you have a bunch of non-Teslas, that's good. You go to them. Telematics, Tesla type oriented tracking, and just use cases. It's obviously standard fleet. We use a company called Fleet. I actually have their hat on right now. It's
Nice.
FLETE. They're a great resource for operations organization. So that's how we organize all of our claims, all of
Hmm.
our day-to-day operations. It merges the Turo data with other data. If you're a Turo host or if you're even a rental car company or if you're a fleet service at all, so you have semis, I
Hmm.
think Fleet is one, it's a cheaper option than most companies and they are small enough. They raised money recently and they can make changes that like optimize your business very, very quickly. And they focus on automation. The goal is
Cool.
not to give you another button to click like a CRM. The goal is to literally
Yeah.
create automation steps where it moves something from your business.
Very nice. And I know insurance is a big topic. Before we got on air, we were talking about Uber's latest earnings call, and their stock went down 11% because their bookings weren't as high, and Dara really blamed insurance. This seems to be a big issue with shared fleets right now. How do you guys, is this just an expensive line item for you guys, or what do you think about insurance right now with shared fleets?
Our most expensive item.
Most expensive line item.
Besides
Is
the
that
debt.
because people are getting into accidents, or what's driving that cost?
Monthly premiums, goals, yeah, that I would say besides the obviously debt servicing the vehicles,
Mhm.
that's a very, very expensive aspect of the business. I think Uber operates in a unique spot where they don't own any assets. And I think
Yeah.
when you're trying to fill the pond per se, you have to fill the buckets of demand and supply. You need to be able to control some of those levers at some point, whether
Hmm.
it's, having full-time drivers that you might employ or having your own
Hmm.
vehicles that they might drive, right? And I think because they can't just have an absolute control of even just the smallest percent of toggles, they really rely on other people and also this like insurance process. Like you're going to have higher risk if you have people who are new to the platform. They not
Hmm.
focus on the little phone on their far left side and they're driving. They're not used that way. There's like many things. I think that kind of wraps around Turo's issues, or not Turo, Uber, is that they don't own everything and they only own certain aspects of the marketplace, right? And
Hmm.
that inherently will create more variable events, right? And I think
Yeah.
that will align with their insurance risk. And I think insurance is going to be a pain in the ass in the rideshare space, regardless. We
Hmm.
used Y Risk, which I believe is backed by the Hartford, and Ed, obviously, who you know from Hub. They've been a
Yeah, we've
great
had
partner for us.
Ed,
They have,
Ed Kerr. We've had him on the podcast before. He's been our kind of go-to insurance expert for shared fleets. I've actually known him for like 7, 8 years, which is funny because it's a long time
really,
in the
yeah.
ride share years.
He's a great guy. He's helped us figure out a way so we could have the policy that kind of overlaps on Turo and off of Turo,
Mhm.
which is, from my understanding,
So
very,
you
very,
can
very
kind of
unique.
cover people. So I guess you're covering people on Turo, off Turo if they rent a car directly from you, and then also for Uber drivers. That's kind of unique,
Correct.
right?
Yep. Yep. It's very, very unique. We just call it gig and non-gig is how it gets segmented. So if it's
Got it.
gig, it's for the Uber type renters. And that's been a really good blessing for us because it's allowed us to like actually go into the space with less risk
Hmm.
involved.
So yeah, so what would be like one or two examples of something you guys are doing to kind of directly mitigate? You talk about, Uber. I think that's a good point. Maybe we'll dive into, but you guys own your fleet. How does that translate
Yeah.
into, things you can do on the insurance side to be safer or less premium, lower premiums?
Yeah. So I think for us, it doesn't really change. You're saying for lower premium. So the Uber premium issue is different than ours because obviously they have a
Got it.
marketplace there in those cars. But for us in general, the biggest thing is the longer term renters provide less risk on the insurance because
Hmm.
you will have someone who you have your coverage set aside for and you know your periods that you have coverage on. So
Yeah.
if someone comes in this car for a year, you know that you have this is their personal policy. This is
Hmm.
when they're driving on period zero, I believe is what it is when they're not driving Uber. And then when they're not Uber, they're covered here. And if the
Yeah.
car is parked, that car is covered by them, right? And then that's easier to predict than if it's like a short term rental where it's like a
Yeah.
person I get a car with a fraudulent insurance docs or something
Mm.
crazy, right? And they don't actually
Gotcha.
have insurance or they don't have insurance at all, right? And then your primary is your insurance coverage. And that's
Yeah.
what really protects your car. So you want to keep that risk as like layered as possible. Like you realistically want every person to have insurance or buy some sort of insurance from a
Yeah.
third party enterprise so that you're not the first layer of defense. So you want to be the second layer of defense on every type of claim.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So the last thing I want to ask you about is sort of you kind of teased it here and there, but it's more of a future looking topic. And you're based in Phoenix. So I'm guessing you've taken a Waymo ride or two. And, this is something I just launched a new newsletter called the Driverless Digest to cover, the kind of AV industry. And I think one thing I've been bringing up that is really challenging about Waymo's business is that they do have to own and operate these vehicles. You've sort of brought up a couple good points about the positive. So I'm curious, what do you think about, kind of Uber's approach going forward, in the AV space, a company like Waymo that owns and operates all these vehicles? Where do you see this industry going? Because you mentioned too, you guys are, trying to get into this in the future too, right?
Yeah, so we have if you look up Halo cars, we've talked to them. There's a public announcement with us and them
Oh,
and trying to figure
cool.
out what it looks like to install hardware on our cars, right? So that's for non-passenger oriented stuff. So say somebody wants to have a car at the Four Seasons, right? Maybe we have a
Yeah.
car at the Four Seasons. At the Four Seasons doesn't need a desk for the enterprise. You can have
Hmm.
this virtual kiosk. You can order your car. Our car can drive itself to the Four Seasons. That's great. The future that what we're really focused on is if there is, let's say there's a yes or no situation, you're going to have robo taxis or you aren't. I believe that
Hmm.
there's going to be autonomous driven vehicles and it's going to be yes, it's going to be within 5 years, right? Like the first ones. And there's going to be these companies that manage those fleets. And Elon kind of touched on it a little bit in his
So
speech.
just to clarify, you said like Tesla robo taxis within 5 years, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Let's say arbitrary. Let's say that's the
Yeah.
truth, but that's the
Ish.
actual,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
the assumption or not. There's going to be these companies that manage them, right?
Hmm.
And these will be cars potentially either you own or maybe Tesla owns, right? But I think
Hmm.
beyond that, having the infrastructure in place, knowing how the
Hmm.
automations work on long-term rentals
Yeah.
with Uber drivers, easy shift to go from having Uber drivers and you having to find a driver to be assigned to
Yeah.
your car, having that same exact process, but you don't have to find the driver. You have your assignment and it's just going to drive itself.
Yeah.
But now you got to figure out where do these cars park? And that's the key for us is just
Mm.
figuring out the charger infrastructure. So we have enough level two chargers and the cars can rotate themselves and maybe in the future it changes and it's
Got
wireless
it.
charging, right?
So it sounds
That's
like
the
you're
important
sort of
part for us.
preparing, yeah, for this world where Tesla, if they were to flip on that switch and cars could full self-drive in, limited areas or everywhere, you're a big Tesla fleet owner, you have charging, you have all the other things, I guess, that are required to kind of maintain and run and
Yeah,
operate a fleet. So you're sort of, I don't know, about hedging your bet or preparing for that future too.
yeah, and I think it just becomes like where people always talk about the goal is to sell. When it comes down to it,
Hmm.
it's an exit plan, And I think the most likely exit that we have, if we're really game planning and having a really like focused forward
Hmm.
vision, is the point they do announce that and that flip switches. Because say
Yeah.
we have 1,000 cars at the time, or say we have 1,500 cars,
Hmm.
we are years ahead, not just infrastructure, but also the operation systems
Yeah.
and the actual cars themselves. And if a bigger player wants to step in and take it to the next step, that's
Hmm.
great for us. Say, hey, here's your head start. Here's 1,500 cars. Here's these 4 locations. This is
Yeah.
how we operate. We want to be the leader in this industry this is the price,
Yeah.
versus them starting from scratch and having to build it out. Because when that actually happens, people are going to be playing catch up, right? And that's the point where we become more valuable than we are in the past.
What are your thoughts on the Waymo approach where they sort of own and operate and everything like that? Have you taken one in
Yeah,
Phoenix yet?
I have. I think fundamentally, LiDAR is going to be a longer term issue, less of the ownership of the cars
Hmm.
and just how their permitting works. I think that is going to be a much more difficult task than having like the Tesla vision actually be able to predict and see what's coming. Because I think you really get hindered by
Hmm.
the need of having to have a laser bounce off something
Yeah.
and come back for you to determine distance, right? Because then you're limited by where you can go because you can't. You need that versus if it's
Yeah.
just based on all the vision, which is obviously much more harder. And Tesla's proving that they're trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to have stuff pre-mapped out. Potentially,
Yeah.
you just can map that out in a simulation because you
As you
don't need
go.
physical. Yeah, you can map out in a simulation. You don't need a
Yeah.
physical radar to go back and forth. So I
Very
think
cool.
that will be their bigger issue until that shifts over.
Very cool. Well, Justin, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. We hit on a lot. If folks want to learn more about what you're up to, EV Access, I think there might be some people out there that might want to rent a car from you. There might be some Uber drivers who want to rent a car. There might be some potential fleet owners that want to, get their
Yeah,
cars financed with you. What's the best place for them to go to learn about what you guys are up to and,
yeah,
go explore some of those paths we talked about?
yeah. I'll send you a little Calendly link we send just for more of the fleet owner aspect of it, so we can just
Cool.
maybe proctor those introductions. But the biggest thing, if you're a renter, go to evx.io. We really do offer a lot of people right now. The first week is free, and
Nice.
that's because we know the hardest part is just getting set up and getting to that place. Especially Uber, like rideshare drivers tend to be like more financially strapped sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, hey, we'll give you the opportunity to drive this
That's
car,
cool.
have an inspection a week later. As long as the car is maintained, we're really open to working with those people and building a long-term relationship. And we can definitely help people out in the Phoenix and Salt Lake City area.
Cool. Awesome, Justin. Well, appreciate you coming on.
Yep, appreciate you. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for watching today's episode of the Rideshare Guy podcast. For more information on today's guest, please check the description. Now, you don't want to miss this interview of the Rideshare Guy podcast, so click here and also make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future ones. See you next time.